Hello, this is Erica with Launching Legacies. Welcome to our daily devotional. Today we are continuing our devotional on Sabbath. And so we're talking about the Sabbath as a gift because the Sabbath is a gift to us. So let's look at the passages. We want to remember that because we are New Testament believers. We operate under Mark the 2nd chapter, in the 27th verse, in which Jesus says that Sabbath is for man and not man for the Sabbath, meaning not necessarily held to Sabbath requirements, but that the Sabbath is a day of rest for man. And now we're going to look at Exodus, because in Exodus is when the Sabbath really starts to be referenced a lot. And actually, Exodus, the Sabbath is referenced 15 times in Exodus, 19 times in Leviticus, because of the Levitical law has to do with establishing the Sabbath rules, like what people can and cannot do on the Sabbath and how to keep it holy and so on and so forth. So a lot of consequences there. But so the Sabbath is mentioned 92 times in the Old Testament. Today we're going to stay in the Old Testament for a bit, and then we'll come back to the New Testament, because you'll be surprised, or you may be surprised to know that 55 times the Sabbath is mentioned in the New Testament. So it's not like the Sabbath disappears when we move to the New Testament, not at all. But the references are a bit different in their nature. And so we want to go back to the origins of the Sabbath, because Jesus is talking to the Pharisees when they're asking about, when they're accusing him and his disciples of working on the Sabbath because they are harvesting the grain to eat for themselves. And indeed, if we look back at the law in Exodus, that would have been a problem. Okay. So I'm going to read some passages in Exodus to kind of give us a baseline of how God starts to establish the Sabbath as a part of the traditions of the children of Israel. And he does that when they've come out of Egypt, right? Because in Egypt, they did not necessarily observe the Sabbath because they were bound to the Egyptian rule, or what we can consider, from a theoretical standpoint, we consider Egyptian rule the world system. Okay, that would equate to for us who are modern believers. So now let's go to Exodus 16. The Sabbath is mentioned several times, but this particular verse is important. We're at Exodus 16, verse 29, and it says, God is saying Moses to tell to the people that they must realize that the Sabbath is the Lord's gift to you. And that's a big deal. I think about, this is the God of creation. This is the Alpha and Omega. And he's saying that the Sabbath is a gift to you. Right. And I just, that makes me so delighted, because, not that I love gifts so much, but I love every gift from God. Right. And so if the Sabbath is a gift to the people, then that's something that we want to pay attention to and be mindful to observe. And so the Sabbath is the Lord's gift to you. That is why he gives you a 2-day supply on the 6th day. And this is talking about the manna. Okay, and the quail. So a 2-day supply on the 6th day. And so there will be enough for 2 days. On the Sabbath day, you must each stay in your place. Do not go out and pick up food on the seventh day. Okay, so remember, manna and quail were how God fed the children of Israel in the wilderness when they were wandering. And so he's saying, listen, on the 7th day, there's not going to be any manna and quail, right? That's not going to happen. And so why isn't there going to be manna from heaven or quail coming in for you? Because on the 6th day you need to make sure that you have enough for 2 days, which will cover the 6th and the 7th day. Okay, because there is no work on the 7th day, or the Sabbath day. So I'm going to go to Exodus 20 and 10. It says, but the 7th day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. Okay, this includes you, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and your foreigners living among you. Okay, so nobody works on the Sabbath. That's what Exodus 20 and 10 is establishing. Now remember that Exodus 28 is the part of the 10 Commandments, and it says that we should remember and observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Okay, so this is a part of introduction to the Sabbath that God is giving to the children of Israel. And since he's giving laws about the Sabbath, about how that should be observed and what should be done and not be done. And essentially, Nobody works on the Sabbath. That just doesn't happen. Nobody in your house works. If your guests come to you, they don't work. Nobody is working on this day, and it's separated. And the terminology here is to keep it holy, keeping the Sabbath holy, right? And so Exodus 28, remember and to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. And so to understand what God is talking about here, we're going to look at the word holy and the etymology of the word holy. And so when we get to holy, the definition is to be separated to God. Okay. And so when we talk about that this day is holy, it's saying the day is separated unto God. Okay. And why does God decide to separate a day unto himself after 6 days of work? Well, again, we go back to that first passage that we read in Exodus 16:29 said that it's a gift to you to keep it holy or separated. So what God is establishing is his sovereign rule or covering over man. And it's important to understand that why the gift is there. Yes, it's there because humans need rest. For one, we need a time to be separated, to be set apart, to be put into our own place. But God is establishing for us that day. He's giving us basically our work week and our rest and our resting times. And the reason why he's establishing that, for one, he already established it when he set the planets in motion, and he set the sun in the sky and the moon and whatnot, and set the timing of the day, right? Because God is who did the celestial timekeeping of our planet, the rotation and so on and so forth, and the tilt of the planet, which has to do with seasons and whatnot. So when God set all that in place, he also set a time for us to recognize when we needed to rest. And he set that time apart, even from Genesis, saying he blessed the Sabbath day and he dedicated it to holiness. So he set it apart as a special day. Now, why would this be important to us New Testament believers? Well, because the nature of the Sabbath is still what it's supposed to be. In other words, we need to still treat the Sabbath like it's a gift. Okay, so we need to take a Sabbath. We need to utilize a time of Sabbath. Why? Because God has given it to us as a gift. He's dedicated this time for separation. Okay, so he's made it holy or dedicated, and so those things are still in action. Now, Jesus says in Mark 2 that again the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, meaning to follow its requirements. And so because Christ came, he fulfills the law, and so all of the punishments for working on the Sabbath and these things that go with the Sabbath are done away with by Christ. They're fulfilled because of Christ. So Christ offers us rest. Christ offers us this opportunity, but it doesn't mean that he wants us to negate this gift that God has given to us. He is the greater gift, so we acknowledge the greater gift which is in Christ, but he still wants us to see that the Sabbath is indeed a way of understanding that God is covering over our time, and he wants us to honor what he has given to us. It's like a person giving you a precious jewel. This precious gift, I'm saying, is sacred, it's important, it follows under my rule and under my reign, and this is what I value for you, and I'm giving it to you, and then we take that and throw it in the trash or put it on the ground and don't deal with it. Okay, when we do that, we're saying to God that this has no value. And in fact, we know that that's not true. If God has found value in it, then we need to find value in it, right? If he has found value in it, we need to value it. And that's definitely what Jesus is discussing here in Mark 2nd. He's not saying don't honor the Sabbath. He's saying actually remember that the Sabbath was created for you. It's created for your rest. It's created for your honor, not for you necessarily to follow every rule and every dot and every line and say, oh, we should kill a person because they work on the Sabbath. Now we got to do this because they do this. No, he's saying taking away that portion or the burden of the law, because he has taken away the burden of the law. It's important for us to recognize the Sabbath as a gift. So then that compels us as believers to think about the Sabbath and whether or not we take a Sabbath. Now, every day for a Christian or New Testament believer should be taken as a holy day. It should be taken as a righteous day. We should honor God with every day of our life. This is true. However, it is wrong to assume that because every day is holy, we don't need a day of rest. That'd be wrong, because that's not the principle operating. God is not saying, okay, be unholy on these days and do this on these days and then that. No, he's saying, what he's establishing here in this passage is this, that because God has given it to us as a gift and he has called it holy, we need to be mindful that there should be at least a day in which we give Sabbath recognition, meaning a time of separation and consecration to the Lord in holiness. There should be a day for that. If you're working day and night, always working, even if you're doing things for the Lord all the time, always, and you're never honoring that God decided that we needed a time of rest, then you're not looking at the gift as you should be looking at it. Now, again, it's not legalistic. Oh, I can't drive my car. I can't do these. I can't do these things. That's not necessarily that's over the top as far as Jesus is concerned, according to Mark 2:27. However, it is important that we recognize that rest is essential, because see, there are people who don't do anything. Right? They just stop working, stop doing every single thing, and still are not honoring the Sabbath. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow as we go back into the New Testament. But I want you to be mindful that that's not the way that God will want you to live. He will want you to honor the Sabbath, and he will want you to keep it holy. But he wants you to recognize that it was a gift for you. The Sabbath was created for man, not man for the Sabbath. And so be encouraged with these words. I want to ask you to definitely read the passages in Exodus in which God is establishing the Sabbath within the children of Israel. And if you feel really adventurous, go ahead and read Leviticus. You'll find a lot of references to the Sabbath there. Although I have to tell you, it is quite a drawn out book of the Bible. Though it is beneficial, because you can see God's care and concern and details amongst the children of Israel. And so anyhow, whatever you choose to study, I want to encourage you to understand this, that God loves us, and he's made all of creation has been designed with us in mind. We're not an afterthought. We were the thought on his mind and on his heart. And so he has given us good things, and the Sabbath is one of the good things. And so I want to tell you that I'm praying for you, and I encourage you to please pray for Launching Legacies. And we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow with another of our devotionals. We'll be finishing out the series on the Sabbath. Until then, be blessed.